As you think about the thousands and thousands of employees and people who've worked here over the 100 years, and then you think about the memories. Even today, people talk about Line, Arlo, Fred, Harry. People have vivid memories and wonderful stories about these individuals as people. And so it's fun to be with a group of retirees who can say, let me tell you the story of what Harry did. Let me tell you about the 46-page memo that Fred wrote to me. Let me tell you how Lion Bradley used to operate in his office. Those are great, great stories, and they have fond, long memories.
We had a district manager in Cincinnati by the name of Harry Stabe. Harry Stabe was from Nebraska. He was about 6 feet 12 inches tall. He was a huge guy, raw-boned would be a good expression. He prided himself on his physical strength. He was a character. He was the one that tried to fire Ted Schaller, but that's another story. Anyway, we got a new line of starters called Series K. Portable Series K. And the question was, how do we present this full line of very compact starters to the customers? Well, obviously, you take it and show them how it works. So Fred, when I say Fred, I mean Fred Loock, not Fred Wiley on the test floor. Wiley had tremendous power. All he had to do was say, Fred wants it, and he got it. Okay. Fred Loock said, look, from my years in New York as a district manager of that office, which is another story, I watched the shoe salesman go down the street with little portable carrying things, only the carrying things were on wheels. So Fred designed this box-like thing that held a size 3, 2, 1 aught starter, new Series K, beautiful velour base, and a cap that went over the whole thing. It looked like a traveling suitcase, like one of these old sewing machine cases. And he put wheels on it. And then he had me go out in the middle of January and run around the block in ice and snow in Milwaukee to see whether this really worked, this pushing this thing. Well, we had one additional thought. Fred said, I'd like to have a special one for Harry Stabe. These weighed 40 pounds. So Fred had me go down into the shop, and we cut some heavy gauge steel and put it in the base of this unit, which doubled the weight. It went from 40 pounds to 80 pounds, and we put the velour on top of it, and then we shipped them out to the field. And I'd written a memo that said it was 40 pounds and we need to do this and that. Well, every office got their copy. Some of you in the room got yours. And they started to use them. And every morning, Fred would come over to my desk and say, have we heard from Harry yet? And I'd say, no, Fred, and his face would drop, and he'd go back to his office and shuffling his paper. This went on for days and days and days. And finally, one day, the explosion occurred. Because it seemed that Harry had to call on an architect engineer who was on the 4th floor of an elevator-less building. So Harry carried this thing up 4 flights of stairs, and he got up there, and he was perspiring, he was panting, and the architect engineer said, Harry, you're running out of gas. What's the matter, aren't you? Well, he said, they got this kit for me to carry, and I brought it up here. I should be able to do it because it only weighs 40 pounds. And the architect engineer said, let me lift that. He said, Harry, this is more than 40 pounds. They got us scales. And, of course, they found out it wasn't 40, it was 80. And I'll tell you, the letter and the teletype and the language that took place from Harry on that one, but that's the kind of fun exercise in a very serious promotion program that we had.
I'm going to tell you a story about Fred Loock, but at the time it happened to me, what I saw, I had not yet been sent out here into exile in Milwaukee. I was still in New York. And Arlo Paul, you recall, was the manager of the New York office. And every year he threw a marvelous picnic in his backyard at his lovely estate in Connecticut. And we all went up there, and he kindly invited the export department to go with him. And we got together. We played such things as croquet, and we played whist, and we did all kinds of things which actually did absolutely nothing for losing weight, but very relaxing. And I said to myself, I don't know much about Fred Loock. I'd only met him once. And I said, I wonder what is the measure of this man, because his fame seems to be so great in the company, and his power is so great. I said, I wonder what's going to happen, because Fred Loock was at the picnic. So in the course of events, Arlo served up this tremendous meal. We all ate, and I kept my eye on Fred Loock. And why did I keep my eye on Fred Loock? Well, I knew everybody else kept their eye on Fred Loock. That's why. Anyway, I watched him. That man ate a tremendous meal also, but then he came out with the secret of why he was so powerful and so successful in business and had such great influence on those of us who worked for him, inspired us, counseled us, listened to all our stories, kept nodding his head and said, don't worry, I'm not going to fire you, that sort of thing. He was eating corn, and I watched him, and I watched him. He ate 17 ears of corn. I said to myself, anybody that can do that, I said, can do anything. I have no longer any worries about the future of the Allen Bradley Company. I said, the power is in the hands of the right man.
You know, Fred was a guy who believed in the human touch. I remember one Christmas I was eating over in the cafeteria, and I came back. It was in the evening, about maybe 8 o'clock, and he was sitting there at his desk with a stack of Christmas cards, and I'm not kidding. There were thousands of them, this many that he hadn't signed, this many that he had signed. And as I walked in, he gave you that look, and he said, you think I'm crazy, don't you? I said, no, sir. He said, you wonder why I'm signing all these, don't you? I said, yeah, I do. He said, let me tell you something. 99 people out of 100 that received my Christmas card don't know that I personally signed them. But the 100th person knows, and that makes it worthwhile.
I got assigned to Dallas, Texas. The only way I could get Fred Loock to sit still, we had to sell our way out, is I caught him in the head in the stall next to me, and I convinced him that I should be assigned, and that's how he assigned me, sent me to Dallas, Texas. Didn't tell Virgil, because Virgil was in the doghouse at that point in time, so my calling cards arrived one day before me.
But I see Art Gredinger here, and it reminds me of Nipper Sink. Nipper Sink out there was an old sulfur-ridden resort area, and I think Heinz Schlicke had the word for it. What did he call it? I don't know. But in any event, I was in a room next to a fellow called Art Gredinger. Art, would you stand up, please? Show Arthur Gredinger, who left Allen Bradley before I did. And Art had the room adjacent to us. And this was when things were sort of still frugal Allen Bradley, because I started there in 1946. Anyhow, Art went in there, and he tried to turn the shower on. And the shower didn't work. And so he said something to me, and I said, Art, take a bath or something. Anyhow, he went back into that room, and he had these humongous bathtubs about this long and about this deep, a ladder to get into. And I heard the water come on in that bathroom. And it stopped. A while later, I heard the thing go, blub, 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 blub. Started empty out, blub, blub. It became midnight, blub, blub. 1 o'clock, blub, blub. And I was right adjacent to you, Art, and all I know is that I couldn't sleep. Now, how you slept through that beats the hell out of me.
The second week when the distributors were there, the guy from McNaughton McKay in Detroit caught a lot of fish, or got his hands on a lot of fish, and John Mason and I made a deal and bought all those fish and took them up and put them in Fred Loock's bathtub. And when he got up, he didn't notice it at night, but the following morning he got into the bathtub, and he's got these darn fish swimming around.
I sat pretty close to Fred in the office, and there was Bill Younger and John Faunus and Ray Streeter and myself. So we heard a lot of the conversations which we had not only with the salesman, but also with the people in the plant. If Ken Purdy did not ship on time, the word would get to Fred Loock. And this one time, they called Milton Groth in, because Milton Groth at that time was the head of the traffic department. And Fred was trying to determine why it took so long to get a shipment out to the customer. And so Milt came up with all kinds of excuses, which Fred was not buying. So then he finally came along. He says, well, Fred, you know, there's a weekend involved. Fred says, no, Milt, there's 2 weekends involved. He says, no, Fred, 1 weekend. Fred says, no, 2 weekends, here and here.
I'll fill in with a strange one. There was a customer in Boston who used our contactors on a loom operation. And the customer, Ray Norris, was the manager out there in Boston at the time. And the customer sent a big order in. And I mean, it was over $100,000. And boy, in those days, that was something you really, your chin was out. And the customer wrote a letter with it. And the customer said, you make a fantastic product, and I want you to know that it'll operate for 50 million operations, and we love you. Well, I got the order, and I got the letter, and I thought, well, now this is a nice pat on the back, and I showed it to Fred. I thought he'd be happy. He took the order, he read the letter, he took the order, and he put it in his desk drawer and shut the drawer. I said, wait a minute, I got to process the order. Fred said, no, we're not going to process the order. He's wrong. I said, what do you mean he's wrong? Our operations, our device will not go 50 operations. He's wrong, and we're not going to ship under the circumstances where he's not understanding what our product will do. And I said, Fred, nobody else will do 25 million. They won't even do 10. I don't care. He's wrong, and we're not going to ship the order. Well, you can imagine Ray sitting in Boston, the customer's running out of product, and I can't get at Fred's drawer because it's locked. So finally, I said, we got to do something. So finally, Andy Mellon and I got our heads together, and and Fred said, if you get the customer to come out here and apologize for his mistake, we will then ship the product. So we got the chief engineer from the customer. He flew out to Milwaukee. We had a full day, take him through the labs and all that stuff. And the guy was completely convinced we couldn't go 50 million. We could go 25, and the competitors could go 10. And at the end of the day, we're sitting around the table having a kind of a love feast and winding things up, and Fred walked in and sat down. He said, well, if we settle this thing, you admit you're wrong? You know, really a soft touch with the customer. Do you admit you're wrong? And the chief engineer of the customer said, well, I don't know. I still think I'm right. And with that, Fred grabbed the damn order off the desk and went back to his office and locked it up again. I waited 1 week until he took a trip. Jimmy'd opened his drawer, and we shipped it.
Don Fitzpatrick and I got together. Bill, you're out in the bathroom. No, you're right here. Yeah. Anyway, we sat down one time, and we filled out one of those slips this is for the Tuesday meeting. I'm sure you've all heard of it. Fred's 3-hour meeting that he wouldn't let us go to the toilet or anything like that until he got the doctor to say that we could go to the toilet. But he didn't go in 3 hours. But anyway, we sat down and made a map of the King Arthur's table. And that's what that big, long table was that they bought in that room. And there was Les Watson was Friar Tuck. And Harvey Swanstrom was, I've forgotten. As you went around the table, of course, you know who King Arthur was. But I don't know if you know Sir Lancelot. That's right.
Actually, Fred had to wait for an elevator one day this is a true story, too. They're all true. He had to wait for an elevator to get to his Tuesday meeting. He was never on time anyway. But nothing started till he got there. And he was waiting for the elevator, and these were Otis elevators. And the elevator was late, and he got so angry, he said to Frank Fisher, we are going to design our own elevator controls for the new building. And that's exactly what happened. Otis got thrown out on their ear, and we got into the elevator business.
In our series case starter, it was very, very easy to take apart and put together. So we had a blindfold test, and this was put in all of the magazines, how you could take this starter apart and put it back together blindfolded. And Arndt came up with this ad and was really downgrading Fred, saying you really shouldn't do that because you could get in trouble with that. And Fred says, I wrote that. That's the way I want it. It's going to stay. So Arndt says, okay. And then he started walking away. He says, I just thought I had to tell you that in order to keep you out of trouble. And he was about halfway off the sales department at that time. And Fred said, young man, come back. This was right after you joined Allen Bradley. He says, I hired you to get me out of trouble when I get in trouble, not to keep me out of trouble.
You know, the real part of that one was I had the suggestion that we use monkeys to put this starter together.
You know, the company is certainly a very progressive one. It always has been, but there are some reservations certain executives had about the company. If you go into the office building, when they were building it, they put in the finest air handling system in the world. We all remember it cost us millions of dollars. It was beautiful. They put down 2,500 pilings over the old St. Luke's site. You go down that basement, that lower level, stainless steel safe, all the money, the boilers, the 75,000-gallon tanks for the water. There's a big gaping hole over there, huge. I never found out, but I do know. One day I was told why, because despite Harry's faith in the engineering department and Dean Perkins and Carrier, he had a space for the boilers just in case the system didn't work.
I can recall learning about Allen Bradley by reading the ads in the Saturday Evening Post about this company that made electrical controls, so I'd clip those ads out of the Saturday Evening Post. So the story goes that we had advertised in the Saturday Evening Post and U.S. News and World Report, and to get the story out, you know, image advertising. And so long time in Saturday Evening Post, and Saturday Evening Post editorialized against Barry Goldwater in a very vindictive way. And Fred Loock wrote a letter in and said, you've just gotten the last ad out of this company. We will never advertise again in the Saturday Evening Post. And then the story, and I hope it's true because I've told it 100 times. If it isn't, I'm going to blame you, that somebody from the East Coast, an executive from a company, called Mr. Loock and said, Mr. Loock, I don't have any idea what Allen Bradley makes, but send me $10,000.
That's a true story, and we were hoping to send him locomotives, but we didn't make that.
We sent that guy 10,000 ferrite cores.
All autographed by Bob.
Some punishment by Schlicky. Some punishment. Anyway, as I thought, this whole thing has become all about Fred Loock, but I don't know, we may never do this again. And I just want to say, and I think I could speak for an awful lot of people in this room, that working for Allen Bradley was lots of fun. It was really, I loved to get up in the morning and come to work at the factory. I mean, I looked forward to it. I even shaved every day. But I remember when I went to college, I majored in English and American history. Now, if there was ever a guy that a company like Fred Loock, that a company like Allen Bradley would never hire knowingly, was somebody who majored in those two, right? They're looking for engineers. They're looking for people who knew what lock rotor currents were. To this day, I don't know what a lock rotor current is. And I made my way through Allen Bradley and did pretty damn well. So, but I just want to say that I've come now for the last 3 or 4 or 5 years to these events, and as Hal Hornifer has mentioned already, once you do get in with this crowd, and that also includes many who are no longer with us, there was a sort of a feeling of, wow, I'm back with friends, you know? Some people you only see every 3 months. Sometimes you don't see that often, and then you get bad news about them. And then you don't hear any more about them because they're gone, except if people bring them up in conversation. But all in all, the experience of working for Allen Bradley, I must say, was overwhelmingly good. And I don't want to be too sentimental about it, but in my next life, I may well go to some engineering college and find out what that lock rotor. I mean,